On a quiet Tuesday morning, every screen on Earth turned black at the exact same second. Phones went silent. Televisions froze. Even the giant digital billboards in busy cities stopped showing ads. For 3 seconds, the whole planet seemed to hold its breath. Then words appeared, written in every language at once, on every screen, in every home, in every country. The message was simple. People of Earth, you have 30 days to submit to the rule of the Scarn Dominion. Resist and you will be destroyed. Millions of people stood frozen in the streets, staring up at giant screens they did not understand. Some laughed, thinking it was a prank. Others cried. Many just stared, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. But far away from the panic, deep under a mountain in a hidden command center, a small group of people did not panic at all. They had been waiting for this message for 20 years. General Laura Bennett stood in the center of a large room filled with screens and quiet voices. She was not surprised. Her face showed no fear, only focus. She turned to the man beside her, Dr. Michael Ortiz, the coalition's chief expert on alien language and signals. He had been studying strange radio signals from deep space for most of his career, and he was the first person to translate the message properly. They call themselves the Scarn, Ortiz said, reading from his screen. The message is not just a threat. It is written like they expect us to just give up, like they already know we can't fight back. Bennett nodded slowly. That's because they think we're still the same people from their old data. They don't know what we've built. Nobody in the room asked what she meant. They already knew. For 20 years, ever since a strange metal object was found drifting silently past Jupiter, humanity had kept a secret. That object was not a rock, not space junk, not a meteor. It was a probe. A machine built by someone else sent to watch Earth from a distance. When scientists opened it and studied its parts, they found something that changed everything. The technology inside was not friendly. It was built for war. That single discovery changed history. In secret meetings that no news channel ever reported, world leaders made a choice. They stopped fighting each other. Old enemies became partners. Border disputes were quietly settled. Trillions of dollars that once went to competing armies were redirected into one single project, hidden from the public and from any other watching eyes. They called it the Unity Program. Its only goal was to prepare Earth for a day that might never come, or might come sooner than anyone expected. That day had now arrived. Bennett walked to the center console and placed her hand on a panel. A soft chime rang through the room. "Begin Phase 3, she said calmly, as if she were ordering lunch. Around the world, deep inside old mountains, hidden ocean bases and secret orbital stations, machines that had been sleeping for years began to wake up. Fleets of ships, invisible to normal scanners, began powering their engines. Soldiers who had trained for a war they were never told the reason for finally received their true orders. None of them knew the enemy's name until that morning, but they knew exactly what to do. Colonel Peter Hale, commander of Earth's main defense fleet, received the order aboard his flagship, hidden inside a debris field near Mars. He read the alert twice before speaking to his crew. "Looks like the day finally came," he said, his voice steady but quiet. His crew did not cheer. They simply nodded and got to work, the way people do when they have trained for something so long that fear no longer has room to grow. Back on Earth, news channels scrambled to explain the strange message to a frightened public. World leaders appeared one by one to ask for calm, though few viewers noticed how calm the leaders themselves already seemed. There was no chaos in government buildings, no emergency evacuations, no panic among world armies. To ordinary citizens, this felt strange. To the people who had spent 2 decades preparing in secret, it felt like the final step of a plan finally coming true. In the command center, Ortiz kept studying the alien message, searching for anything Bennett's team might use. He noticed something odd in the way the Scarn had written their warning. Their words carried confidence, but also carelessness, the tone of someone who has never truly been challenged. It sounded like the message of a group that expected easy surrender, not war. "They don't think we can fight," Ortiz said quietly. Bennett allowed herself the smallest smile, the kind that came only after years of discipline. Then, let's show them they're wrong. She looked around the room at her officers, each of them calm despite the impossible weight of what was coming. 30 days. That was the deadline the Scarn had given humanity to give up its entire planet. But Bennett already knew something the Scarn did not. Humanity was not going to spend those 30 days preparing. They were going to spend them waiting, patiently, the way a predator waits in silence long after its prey has stopped noticing it is there. Outside, the sky over every major city stayed calm and blue, giving no hint of the invisible fleets rising quietly into orbit. Far above, hidden behind the moon's shadow, the first line of Earth's true defense began to take its position. Nobody on the surface could see it. Nobody was meant to, not yet. Somewhere far beyond the edge of the solar system, the Scarn fleet was already moving closer, confident and unaware. They believed they were approaching a weak, divided species about to break under pressure. They had no way of knowing that the message they sent had not frightened humanity at all. It had simply confirmed what Earth's leaders already suspected for 20 long years. The war they were about to start was one humanity had never stopped preparing for: 312 worlds. That was the number written at the top of every report inside the Scarn Dominion's war archive. 312 planets conquered without a single failed campaign. It was a number the Dominion's soldiers were taught to recite with pride from the day they were old enough to hold a weapon. To them, war was no longer a risk. It was a formality, a tradition repeated so many times that it had become almost boring. High Marshal Doran Vey sat alone in his private quarters aboard the flagship, watching old recordings of Earth from decades earlier. The footage was grainy and outdated, showing soldiers fighting in muddy trenches, using guns that fired metal bullets instead of energy. He let out a short laugh and shook his head. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a species look so primitive and so eager to destroy itself. "They fight each other over lines drawn on maps," he said to no one in particular, sipping from a metal cup filled with a thick violet liquid. "Imagine wasting resources like that." A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Envoy Ussa Rel entered without waiting for permission, something only she was allowed to do among the Dominion's rigid ranks. She was not a soldier. She was a scientist and diplomat, chosen for her sharp mind rather than her loyalty to tradition, and it often made her the only voice in the fleet willing to question decisions others accepted without thought. "You wanted to see the updated report," she said, placing a small data disk on his desk. Vey waved a hand lazily. "Summarize it for me." Ussa hesitated. "The probe data we're using is old, 15 years old at least, possibly more." Vey barely looked up. "Species like this don't change in 15 years. They're still fighting each other with metal and fire." "That's exactly my concern," Ussa said carefully. "Our last confirmed signal from their planet was intercepted right after our final scouting probe vanished near their fourth moon. We assumed the probe simply failed. But what if it didn't fail on its own?" Vey finally looked at her, his expression somewhere between amusement and irritation. "You think a species that still burns fuel to fly through their own sky managed to destroy one of our scouting probes?" "I think we don't actually know what they've built since then," Ussa said, "and that worries me more than anything in this old data." Vey stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the endless stretch of stars beyond the fleet's hull. Behind him stretched hundreds of warships, more than enough to erase a dozen planets the size of Earth. To him, the very idea of doubt felt unnecessary, almost insulting. "You worry too much," he said. "This is a formality, Envoy. We send the warning, they panic. Their leaders argue among themselves the way they always do. Within 30 days, they surrender out of fear alone, just like the others before them. There is no version of this campaign where we lose." Ussa did not respond right away. She had seen conquests before, but something about this particular target felt different from the reports she had studied on other worlds. Most species reacted to first contact with confusion or desperate pleading. Earth's leaders had responded with something else entirely: silence. No panic broadcasts, no desperate offers of surrender. Just quiet, calm silence, the kind that unsettled her far more than screaming ever could. Later that day, Vey called a meeting of his senior officers inside the war room, a wide circular chamber lit by a massive holographic display of the solar system. Officers from a dozen different ranks stood at attention as Vey outlined the plan with the casual confidence of someone repeating a routine he had performed hundreds of times before. "We send an advanced scout squadron toward their outer defense line," he explained, tracing a path with his finger through the glowing star map. "A show of strength, nothing more. Let them see exactly what awaits them if they refuse to submit." One younger officer, eager to prove himself, asked the question most others were too proud to raise. "Marshal, should we expect any resistance at all?" Vey chuckled, the sound echoing across the chamber. "Resistance? From a species that still argues about borders on a single planet? No, this will be nothing more than fireworks for their television screens." The other officers laughed along with him, the sound filling the room with easy confidence. Only Ussa remained silent, watching the glowing model of Earth rotate slowly above the table, small and seemingly harmless from this distance. She thought again about the missing scouting probe, the strange silence from Earth's leaders, and the quiet feeling in her chest that something about this campaign did not fit the pattern of the 312 worlds that came before it. As the meeting ended and officers filed out to prepare their ships, Vey placed a hand on Ussa's shoulder, his tone softening slightly. "Trust the numbers, envoy. 312 victories cannot be wrong." Ussa offered a small nod, though the uneasy feeling in her chest refused to fade. She glanced one last time at the glowing image of Earth before the projection faded away, unable to shake the thought that perhaps, this time, the numbers were about to meet something they had never faced before. Far beyond the edge of the fleet's sensors, closer to the solar system than any of the Dominion's officers realized, something was already waiting quietly in the dark. Space near Mars was empty and silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy rather than peaceful. 12 Scarn scout ships moved through the darkness in a tight formation, their engines glowing faintly against the black. Their sensors showed nothing ahead but empty rock and dust, exactly what old reports had predicted. To the pilots flying these ships, this mission felt more like a routine patrol than the opening move of a war. Junior pilot Rake sat inside the lead scout ship, watching the empty scanner with mild boredom. He had joined the Dominion fleet hopping for glory, expecting his first real mission to feel dangerous and exciting. Instead, he found himself flying through quiet space toward a planet that, according to everything he had been told, could not possibly fight back. "Anything on sensors?" asked his commanding officer through the comm channel. "Nothing," Rake replied. "Just rocks and dust, just like the old maps show." What none of them noticed was a series of small, dark objects drifting silently among the asteroids around them, objects with no heat signature, no active power core, nothing that any normal scanner would recognize as dangerous. They looked like debris. They were not debris. The moment the Scarn scout squadron crossed an invisible line in space, marked only in Earth's hidden defense systems, those quiet objects came alive all at once. Panels split open. Weapons systems powered up in complete silence, using technology built specifically to avoid detection until the very last second. Then, without warning, beams of concentrated energy tore through the darkness. Rake barely had time to react before his ship's shields buckled under the first strike. Alarms screamed through the cockpit. "Contact! Multiple contacts all around us," he shouted, but his voice was lost beneath the chaos filling every channel at once. The Scarn scout ships scattered, firing blindly in every direction, but their weapons found nothing solid to hit. The attacking ships moved with impossible precision, striking from angles that should have been impossible to reach so quickly. Within seconds, 3 Scarn ships were reduced to drifting wreckage. The rest tried to retreat, but retreat was no longer an option. Aboard Earth's lead interceptor, Colonel Peter Hale watched the battle unfold on his display with calm focus. Around him, his crew moved with practiced precision, the same precision they had trained for during 2 decades of quiet preparation. There was no shouting, no panic, only the steady rhythm of a plan being carried out exactly as designed. "Enemy formation is breaking," reported one of his officers. "They're trying to retreat toward deep space." "Don't let them," Hale said simply. Earth's interceptors moved with a speed and coordination the Scarn pilots had never encountered before. Ships that should have taken minutes to reposition adjusted their course in seconds, using technology built from decades of secret research shared quietly between former rival nations. Weapons fired in perfect sequence, guided by systems that predicted enemy movement almost before the enemy itself decided which direction to turn. Rake's ship was struck twice more before its engines failed completely, leaving him drifting helplessly in the middle of the chaos. Through his cracked cockpit window, he watched 2 more Scarn ships explode in silent bursts of light. He had been trained to expect an easy first contact, a display of Dominion strength against a primitive enemy. Instead, he watched his entire squadron collapse in less than 4 minutes. Within moments, an Earth vessel approached his crippled ship, not to destroy it, but to disable its weapons and pull it in using a tractor beam. Rake sat frozen in his seat as unfamiliar boarding pods locked onto his hull, unsure whether to expect execution or something worse. Back aboard the Dominion flagship, High Marshal Doran Vey received the battle report in stunned silence. The scout squadron, a force meant only as a show of strength, had been completely destroyed in less than 5 minutes, with several ships captured rather than destroyed outright. For the first time in his long career, Vey found himself reading a report twice, unable to believe the numbers in front of him. "That's impossible," he muttered. Standing beside him, Envoy Ussarel studied the same report with a very different expression, one of quiet dread rather than disbelief. She had expected something might go wrong. She had not expected total annihilation of an entire scouting force within minutes. "Their weapons fired before our sensors even detected the ambush," she said slowly, reading through the technical data streaming in from surviving black box records. "Our ships never had a chance to fully engage." Vey said nothing, staring at the star map where 12 friendly markers had once glowed steadily. Now there was nothing but empty space where his scout squadron used to be. Elsewhere in the fleet, officers who once laughed confidently about fireworks and easy victories now stood in uneasy silence, watching the same reports circulate through the command network. The number 312, once a symbol of unstoppable power, suddenly felt small and fragile compared to what had just happened near a planet they had expected to conquer without resistance. Aboard Earth's flagship, Colonel Hale watched the retreating remains of the Scarn formation vanish back into deep space. He allowed himself a small breath of relief, though his expression remained calm and unreadable to his crew. "First contact successful," he reported quietly into the comm system. "No losses on our side." Far below, unaware of how close their planet had come to a very different kind of conversation, most of Earth's population continued their daily lives, still frightened by a countdown clock ticking somewhere overhead. They had no idea that their world's future had already shifted dramatically within the first hours of contact. For the Scarn Dominion, the illusion of an easy, guaranteed victory had shattered in less time than it took most of their officers to finish a single meal. Rake woke up expecting pain. Every story he had ever heard about captured enemies described suffering, punishment, or worse. Instead, he woke up lying on a soft bed inside a clean, quiet room, with a gentle light glowing from the ceiling and a tray of unfamiliar food placed neatly on a small table nearby. For a long moment, He simply lay still, waiting for something terrible to happen. Nothing did. A door slid open, and a woman entered, wearing a simple uniform without any obvious weapons. She introduced herself calmly as Dr. Michael Ortiz's assistant, here only to make sure he was comfortable and had everything he needed. Rake stared at her in confusion, unable to understand why an enemy soldier would be treated this way after attacking their planet. "You're not going to hurt me?" he finally asked, his voice raspy from exhaustion. The woman offered a small, polite smile. "That's not how this works here." A short while later, Rake was brought into a plain room with a table and 2 chairs, where General Laura Bennett and Dr. Michael Ortiz waited for him. He expected interrogation methods designed to break his will. Instead, Bennett simply gestured for him to sit, her expression calm and almost curious rather than hostile. "We're not here to hurt you," Bennett said directly. "We just want to understand each other." Rake laughed nervously, though there was no humor in it. "Understand each other? Your people destroyed my entire squadron in minutes. We were told your species barely understands basic energy weapons." Ortiz leaned forward slightly, a very small human gesture. That information was outdated, very outdated. Bennett nodded and gestured toward a large screen on the wall, which displayed old images, burned cities, ruined battlefields, endless rows of soldiers marching toward death. Rake recognized some of these images from Dominion archives, the same footage High Marshal Vey had laughed at only days earlier. "This is what our species used to look like," Bennett said quietly. "For most of our history, we fought each other constantly. Different countries, different beliefs, different resources. We were very good at destroying ourselves." "Then why does your fleet look nothing like this old footage?" Rake asked, genuinely confused now rather than defensive. Ortiz answered this time. "About 20 years ago, we found something similar to what your fleet uses. A single probe drifting silently near Jupiter. When our scientists studied it, we realized someone out there had technology built specifically for war, and they were watching us." Rake's expression shifted slightly. He remembered vague references in old Dominion files about a lost scouting probe near the outer edge of Earth's solar system, dismissed years ago as a simple malfunction. "That probe was yours," Bennett continued. "It told us 2 important things. First, that intelligent life existed beyond our planet. Second, that whoever built it clearly understood war far better than diplomacy." "So you built your own fleet," Rake said slowly, beginning to understand. "We did more than that," Bennett said. "Every country on Earth stopped fighting each other the moment we understood what that probe meant. We combined every resource, every scientist, every soldier into a single project. For 20 years, we prepared quietly, waiting for the day someone might come to test us." Ortiz activated another screen, this time showing a small, dusty museum display. A broken, ancient piece of alien metal preserved carefully behind reinforced glass, surrounded by informational plaques written in several human languages. "That's the actual probe we found," he explained. "It sits in a public museum today, though very few people outside our command structure know its true origin. Most visitors think it's simply an old satellite fragment." Rake stared at the image in stunned silence. He suddenly understood the terrible mistake his fleet had made. The species they had studied through outdated data, the primitive species marked as easy prey in old Dominion reports, had spent 2 decades secretly transforming into something far more dangerous, all triggered by a single accidental discovery. "You've been waiting for us," he said quietly, almost to himself, "this entire time." Bennett nodded slowly. "Not for you specifically, for anyone. We didn't know who or when or why. We just knew that whoever came would likely come with intentions similar to what that probe suggested." For the first time since his capture, Rake felt something other than fear or confusion. He felt a strange kind of respect, mixed uncomfortably with dread for what awaited the rest of his fleet. Meanwhile, far above Earth's atmosphere, similar conversations were happening quietly between Earth scientists and other captured Scarn officers, each revealing pieces of the Dominion's history, their conquest patterns, and their overconfidence built from 312 unchallenged victories. Piece by piece, Earth's intelligence team assembled a clear picture of exactly what they were truly facing. Aboard the Dominion flagship, Envoy Ussa Rel studied recovered fragments of Earth's museum records, quietly transmitted through channels she wasn't entirely authorized to access. She stared at the image of the ancient probe housed behind reinforced glass, a piece of Dominion technology now treated as a historical artifact rather than a weapon. She realized, with a mixture of admiration and fear, that Earth had not simply reacted to the Dominion's arrival. They had been anticipating it for a generation, treating an entire alien invasion not as a possibility, but as an inevitability worth preparing for no matter the cost. As she closed the file, Ussa understood something none of her superiors were yet willing to accept. This was not a conquest anymore. It had never truly been won. It had become something far more dangerous, a war against a species that had already spent 20 years imagining every possible way this conflict could unfold, and had prepared for nearly all of them. Rage, more than logic, guided High Marshal Doran Vay's next decision. The loss of his scout squadron had embarrassed him in front of his entire fleet, and embarrassment was something a man with 312 victories behind him could not easily accept. Rather than pause to reconsider his intelligence, rather than listen to Envoy Ussa Rel's growing concerns, Vay chose the only response his pride would allow. He ordered a full assault. Every warship in the Dominion fleet, hundreds of vessels stretching across a vast section of space, began moving toward Earth in a single overwhelming formation. Vay stood in the center of his war room, watching the massive fleet advance on the star map with grim satisfaction. If a small scouting force had somehow failed, then an unstoppable wave of full military power would certainly succeed where subtlety had not. "Let them see exactly what real strength looks like," Vay said coldly, addressing his senior officers. "No more scouts, no more warnings, we end this quickly." Envoy Ussa Rel stood near the back of the room, saying nothing, though her expression carried quiet dread rather than confidence. She had studied every piece of data recovered from the failed scouting mission, every detail of Earth's unexpectedly advanced weapons, and every strange fragment of information suggesting decades of hidden preparation. None of it matched the pattern of easy victory Vay still expected. As the Dominion fleet crossed deeper into the solar system, Earth's defense network activated in full for the first time. What appeared to Dominion sensors as scattered debris fields, quiet moons, and empty stretches of space were, in reality, carefully hidden defense platforms built over 2 decades of secret cooperation between nations that had once been rivals. Colonel Peter Hale watched the massive Dominion formation approach from his command station, his expression steady despite the sheer size of the incoming force. Around him, officers monitored dozens of overlapping defense systems, all working together with practiced precision. "They're not holding back this time," one officer reported. "Neither will we," Hale replied calmly. The battle that followed unfolded not as a single dramatic clash, but as a coordinated series of traps triggered in careful sequence. Hidden mines detonated among the approaching fleet, disabling engines and shields before any Dominion ship could fire a single shot. Stealth interceptors emerged from previously undetected positions, striking key command vessels with precise, devastating accuracy. Electronic warfare systems, developed using knowledge gathered from the earlier captured scout ships, scrambled Dominion communications, turning a massive, organized fleet into a confused, disconnected mess within minutes. Aboard the Dominion flagship, Vay watched in stunned disbelief as ship after ship reported critical damage across every display in the war room. Formations that had crushed 312 worlds, without difficulty, found themselves scattered, blind, and struggling to communicate with each other. "Status report," Vey demanded, his voice sharper now, edged with something closer to panic than command. "We're losing entire squadrons," an officer replied, barely able to keep pace with the flood of incoming damage reports. "Their weapons are targeting our command ship specifically. It's like they already know our exact formation." Usarel stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "They studied our captured scout ships. They know our command structure, our communication patterns, everything." Vey turned toward her, his composure finally beginning to crack. "This isn't possible. No species adapts this quickly." "They didn't adapt quickly," Usa said firmly. "They adapted 20 years ago. We just never noticed until now." On the human side, Colonel Hale pressed the advantage without hesitation. Earth's smaller, faster ships moved through the broken Dominion formation with coordinated precision, striking damaged vessels while avoiding direct confrontation with the fleet's remaining heavy warships. Every maneuver followed patterns rehearsed thousands of times during 2 decades of quiet preparation, patterns designed specifically to counter a technologically superior but overconfident enemy. Within Earth's hidden command center, General Laura Bennett watched the battle unfold across multiple screens, her expression calm but focused. She turned to Dr. Michael Ortiz, who monitored intercepted Dominion communications, most now filled with confusion and desperate, scattered orders. "Their command structure is falling apart," Ortiz reported. "They're not used to fighting an enemy that predicts their moves." "They've never had to," Bennett replied simply. "Every planet before ours must have surrendered before things got this far." Back aboard the Dominion flagship, Vey watched the last of his advance formation collapse into chaos. Ships that once represented unstoppable power now drifted, damaged and disorganized, across a battlefield they had expected to dominate within hours. For the first time in his long career, doubt crept into his mind, cold and unfamiliar. Usa approached him quietly amid the chaos, her voice steady despite the tension filling the room. "Marshal, if we continue this assault, we will lose more ships than any campaign in Dominion history. We need to consider retreat." Vey said nothing for a long moment, staring at the star map where friendly markers continued disappearing one by one. Pride told him to press forward, to prove that Dominion's strength could not truly be broken by a single, unexpected defeat. But the numbers in front of him told a very different story, one that no amount of pride could ignore forever. Elsewhere, taking advantage of the fleet's confusion, Usa opened a private, unauthorized communication channel toward Earth's command frequency, something strictly forbidden under Dominion protocol. She didn't fully understand why she did it, only that continuing this battle without at least attempting real communication felt increasingly senseless. On Earth's side, Dr. Ortiz noticed the unexpected signal appearing on his monitor, entirely different from the chaotic military chatter surrounding it. He glanced toward Bennett, his expression a mixture of surprise and cautious curiosity. "General," he said slowly, "I think someone over there wants to talk." For the first time since the Dominion's ultimatum arrived weeks earlier, the possibility of something other than total war began to take shape, quietly, amid the wreckage of a battle that had already changed everything both sides believed about each other. Silence filled the war room aboard the Dominion flagship, broken only by the quiet hum of damaged systems struggling to stay online. High Marshal Doran Vey stood staring at the star map, watching the last scattered remains of his once unstoppable fleet drift helplessly across the battlefield. For the first time in his career, silence felt heavier than any battle report ever had. Behind him, Envoy Usarel waited quietly, the open communication channel to Earth still active on a nearby console. She had taken an enormous risk opening that connection without authorization, but watching Vey's expression now, she suspected he would not punish her for it. Not this time. "They're offering a ceasefire," she said softly. Not a surrender demand, an actual ceasefire. Vey turned toward her slowly, his usual confidence replaced by something closer to exhaustion. After everything we did, they're offering peace instead of finishing us. They could have finished us already, Usa pointed out. They chose not to. On Earth's side, General Laura Bennett studied the same open channel from her command center, her officers watching quietly as she considered her next words carefully. Dr. Michael Ortiz stood beside her, ready to translate anything necessary, though the Dominion had clearly begun learning enough of Earth's language through their captured officers to understand basic communication directly. "This is General Laura Bennett of the Earth Defense Coalition," she said calmly into the open channel. "Your fleet has suffered heavy losses. Continuing this battle will only cost more lives on both sides. We are prepared to discuss terms if you are willing to listen." A long pause followed before Vey's voice finally responded, quieter and far less confident than the arrogant tone that had opened this entire conflict weeks earlier. "Why offer peace now, after defeating us so completely?" Bennett considered her answer carefully before speaking. "Because total victory was never our goal. Survival was. We spent 20 years preparing for war, hoping we would never actually need to use any of it." Aboard the Dominion flagship, those words settled heavily among the officers still present in the war room. 312 worlds had fallen to the Dominion's expansion, each conquest built on the assumption that overwhelming force naturally led to lasting control. None of those worlds had responded with restraint after achieving victory. Earth's choice felt entirely unfamiliar, and strangely more unsettling than continued violence would have been. Negotiations began cautiously over the following days, conducted through careful, monitored communication between Bennett's command staff and what remained of the Dominion's shattered leadership. Vey, humiliated by the collapse of his campaign, was eventually relieved of his command by Dominion leadership back on their homeworld, who demanded answers for a defeat unlike anything in centuries of unbroken conquest. Usa Rel, promoted quickly into a temporary leadership role due to her steady judgment throughout the crisis, took over as the Dominion's lead negotiator. Unlike Vey, she approached the discussions with genuine curiosity rather than wounded pride, eager to understand a species capable of turning centuries of internal conflict into decades of quiet, disciplined preparation. During one of the later negotiation sessions, held aboard a neutral vessel positioned between the two fleets, Usa asked Bennett a question that had clearly weighed on her mind since the battle's end. "Your species fought itself for most of its history. How does a civilization that violent become this disciplined so quickly?" Bennett considered the question seriously before answering. "We didn't become disciplined quickly. We spent generations learning painful lessons through war after war among ourselves. When your probe arrived, it simply gave us a single, unified reason to finally apply everything we had already learned." Usa nodded slowly, beginning to understand the deeper truth behind Earth's transformation. The Dominion had studied humanity as a fractured, primitive species locked in constant conflict, never realizing that this same painful history had quietly built the discipline, adaptability, and unity needed to face a much larger threat the moment one finally appeared. The final peace agreement, signed weeks later, did not resemble any previous treaty in Dominion history. Rather than accepting Earth as a conquered territory, the Dominion formally recognized humanity as an independent, sovereign civilization, entitled to full diplomatic standing among the wider galactic community. It was an outcome no one aboard the original invasion fleet could have imagined when they first launched their confident ultimatum. Back on Earth, the news of peace spread quickly, though most citizens still had no idea how close their planet had come to devastating war, nor how long their own governments had secretly prepared for exactly this moment. Public celebrations broke out across major cities, unaware of the quiet, disciplined effort hidden behind 20 years of careful planning that had truly decided their fate. Inside the command center, General Bennett watched the celebration's broadcast live across dozens of screens, her expression calm and thoughtful rather than triumphant. Colonel Peter Hale stood beside her, finally allowing himself a rare, tired smile after weeks of relentless pressure. "They have no idea how close this really was," Hale said quietly. "No," Bennett agreed, "and that's exactly how it should be." Dr. Michael Ortiz, standing nearby, glanced toward the star map still displayed on the main screen, now showing the retreating Dominion fleet alongside newly established diplomatic markers. "Do you think this is truly over?" he asked. Bennett studied the display for a long moment before answering. "This particular threat, yes, but the galaxy is clearly larger and far more dangerous than we ever imagined. We'll keep preparing, just in case someone else decides to test us again." Far beyond Earth's solar system, word of the Dominion's unexpected defeat slowly spread among other watching civilizations, sparking quiet curiosity and cautious respect toward a small, previously unknown species now added carefully to countless galactic records. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive and easily conquered, had proven itself to be something far more complex. A species shaped by centuries of internal struggle, transformed patiently into a quiet, disciplined force that no longer needed to prove its strength through conquest, only through the simple, unshakable confidence of a people who had never truly stopped waiting.